In terms of the games, yeah, I mean, it was just, I think there was a fundamental shift in terms of, not just in terms of kind of audiences. I mean, we'd been to Barcelona the year before for a European swimming event, so we'd swum in the pool prior to the games, and there's something nice about that, I think. It doesn't feel quite so mind-blowing, but you know, for what I think we all noticed, and certainly what I remember when I think back, is the shift in the professionalism of the whole structure. So not just in us as athletes, but in the way that the games actually functioned. The kind of the coaching, the classifiers, just the way that the whole games had been organised, loads and loads of kind of like people knowing what they were doing, clearly well trained, everything ran very, very well, not always perfect, a very high profile in terms of Spain anyway, opening ceremony and closing ceremony, packed arena, I remember, and it really felt for the first time that where there was starting to be an equity with the Olympic Games approach to kind of like organising, and we all noticed that. I guess what started, and it was tricky for me because this is what going into '92, I knew that the way I was sort of feeling as a person and how I was beginning to see the world, I could feel that shifting. And I began to, this is in the lead up to the games too, probably in the sort of 12 months, 6 months before, began to feel that I was wanting to challenge the way the BPA, the UK disability sports structure, was functioning. It always, but I became much more conscious of it. It was always about disabled people competing in sport here, and this huge swathe of non-disabled experts, professionals. I think I described them in some terms as do-gooders, but lots of people who wanted control of us and wanted the glory that they got, and it felt in many ways off the back of our achievements. That probably sounds bitter. I don't mean it to sound bitter, but it's really how things for me started to begin to feel. I couldn't see disabled people maybe who had been competing and now retired coming through the kind of the ranks in terms of leadership roles. And I couldn't understand why that was, because there were so many people who could have taken on those many roles, and yet we weren't represented at anything other than athlete level. And I think that's something that I found increasingly difficult to swallow. And I knew what I wanted to achieve. I wanted to achieve gold medal in 50 metre breaststroke. That was it. Anything else would be a bonus. And I did achieve that. But that was with, I think, quite a lot of hard work in terms of me thinking and my emotions, and parking the beginnings of the disaffection for the time that it took for me to, get to the end of the pool, I guess. It did, but but what we all loved was the recognition, and it was much more than, having loads of people in Seoul was great, but what it felt like in Barcelona was the recognition of the sporting achievement. And that was different. And that was fantastic. But I remember at the time being interviewed after winning the gold. Oh, what do you think people are going to say back in the UK? And this sounds a bit bitter, but it's how I felt at the time, and in many ways, similar now. Is that I remember saying, but no one knows that we're here. And in many ways, I knew my family and friends and work colleagues would love it and would be really chuffed at the achievement. But in terms of society, the general public in the UK, I knew that the vast majority had no idea it was going on, or what it had taken to get there, or that this was about sport rather than triumph over tragedy. I do think it's different now. I do think it's different now. But I guess this is about evolution, isn't it, really? You know, I imagine people that competed in 1960 in Rome saw what happened in Barcelona and thought, wow, my God, how different it is in 92 compared to how it was. And that's just how it goes. I mean, that's the evolution, isn't it, in terms of how disabled people are perceived, how we perceive ourselves, and how the kind of the identity and the confidence of the disability community has shifted to a better place. And you somehow have to know that that's how it was then. And at the time, it was great, and I couldn't have personally done any better. But kind of 20 years on, which is where we are now in 2012, you know, again, things have shifted hugely. In terms of the breaststroke gold and the icing on the cake of the world record, nothing took away the pleasure of that, because I'd absolutely gone there and achieved the one thing that I'd set myself a goal of achieving. The world record, couldn't have asked for anything more than that. And I just remember being completely blown away by what that meant. But they're probably, and that, you know, when you're in the moment of it, adrenaline's pumping, you just, you know, you don't know whether or not to laugh or cry, but what you bask in is the kind of like the roar of the crowd when it happens. You know, that's about ego, isn't it? I mean, it just is. I might as well be honest about that. But there is a point afterwards when the adrenaline kind of like has seeped away. You're back in the kind of like the sort of like the changing rooms, or you're back in the athletes' village, and then you start to think about. So this is what it means to me, but what does that mean to everybody else? And that you want it to mean, I guess you want it to mean as much to everybody else as it means to you personally. It never is going to. But I suppose what I mean is you want people to say, you want people to be proud of the achievement of a GB athlete. That's what you want, and that's what didn't happen.